Welcome to Innisfil Accelerates, a podcast about the people and technology transforming one Ontario town. Today, we're talking about work. Most great business ideas start with a problem. For Michael Agema, the problem had to do with hospitality, the hospitality industry to be specific. You see, Michael had worked in the hospitality industry for decades. Then he started teaching the next generation of hotel and restaurant entrepreneurs at Georgian College. Every summer, there are thousands of weddings and reunions and business conferences in the parks and lakes just north of Toronto, and that's where the problem comes in. Even though there are millions of people living in the Greater Toronto Area, the further north you go, the more sparsely populated it becomes. For event companies and venues, that makes finding staff for all those events extremely difficult. But Michael thought technology might offer a solution. He started working with his two adult sons on a project they call Agema Work. It's a marketplace that connects businesses and workers. Companies get access to a flexible workforce, and workers can connect with jobs outside of their area.
The problem I was solving in central Ontario and ultimately across the country was connecting individuals to work. Especially at the start of the company's early stages in hospitality, and then connecting work with people, because there was a gap in areas where employers would have peaks in employment needs and yet not have enough inventory to fill those needs. So we found a niche, and in 2015 we started it, and we're just growing from there.
So you had a long career working in the hospitality industry. What made you decide to set out and start a brand new company from scratch?
I spent just under 30 years in the public service of post-secondary education. I was a hotel administrator as part of the Georgian College team, got into teaching in the hospitality world in part-time in 1991 while I was still managing the conference center that was owned by the college. Got into full-time. I love teaching. Got into teaching full-time in the early 2000s, and then I became a program coordinator, which is where the ideas started to come up. Because I'll give you a perfect scenario. I would get a call from a mother whose daughter was getting married on the family farm near Barrie, and so she asked, and it's a true story, if we would be able to supply any students to help with serving, perhaps delivering food, cleaning up, and things of that nature. So at the time, I would then send this request over to our Student Success Center, who would then inadvertently post the opportunity and hope that somebody would pick up the phone and call this lady, this mother, and say, sure, I'll be able to help you out. What do I need to know? The unfortunate thing, Danny, is 90% of these never got picked up. And so there was a disconnect. So I thought, how do we improve that? And so when I started investigating it, I thought, the number one reason students were leaving the post-secondary system was because of financial strains. And so I said, if I can create a system that could reduce student debt by providing them opportunities, whether they were in hospitality or not, then I think that would be a win-win, and we could also fill in some of the needs. So that was the onset of it. I took the idea to the Henry Bernick Entrepreneurship Center, to the executive director, John Pickard at the time, and shared with him the business model canvas I had created. And he said in 2015, Michael, I believe in 3 years, this will be so popular and such a needed service that you will leave the college. And he must have had a crystal ball, because I had the opportunity to retire from post-secondary teaching. And also I was in international education, which was also a gap of connecting international students into the workforce. And so those two things came together, including the platform of Agema Work. And that is where we are today, still dreaming big things.
Did you have any hesitation about starting this brand new business so late into your career?
A very good question. And the simple answer is, of course. Yeah. Most people, I had, again, the unique opportunity in my 50s to retire with a pension, and should have, like many other of my colleagues who had retired before me, found a spot south of the border in the warmer climates and wintered there. But I felt I still had a lot to give to the community of which I served. And was there trepidation or second guessing? I would, every day, there is always that moment where I wake up stressed because what happens is I suddenly become responsible for literally hundreds, if not thousands of people's lives in connecting them with viable work. And so there is, and then, growing the platform and to expand it not only in Central Ontario, but from coast to coast to coast, that is then become the vision.
You're working with your two sons, Jake and Mitchell, on Agama work. How has that shaped the direction of the company?
As a parent, I can't speak for any other parent who decided, in their more later years to start a company and then hope, with fingers crossed, that there may be some interest in the siblings around us to say, hey guys, this is something I sure could use your help. I certainly could use your youth to come up with ideas, especially with connecting to that demographic of individuals. And so they have all had some part of the company, whether it was, doing payables. And then currently, as of this summer, my younger son, Jake, took on the role as a business development coordinator. So he took on the role to do all the scheduling, vetting staff, following up, connecting people. So he took on that administrative role. And I will say, Danny, I will quote him. He says, Dad, I don't think many 20-year-olds are responsible for what I am at this age. But the wonderful thing is, we talk about work integrated learning. He's probably getting some of the best work integrated learning experience from being a business student at Georgian College to applying some of his sessions. And believe it or not, as he was studying this past fall, he used a lot of his daily learning in his assignments with conflict resolutions, math and finance, and so on and so forth.
Working with family can be difficult at the best of times. And I just wonder how you manage those dynamics.
Well, I was very clear from both Mitchell and Jake that if they wanted to be a part of the company, that our relationship would be different. That when we worked together, I invited them to be critical, and we would have heated discussions.
I'm sure.
And I put heated with quotation marks. But you know what? We also knew that it was for the betterment of the company. The passion was to make the company better. It wasn't a personal attack on our abilities to move it forward. And at the end of the day, we still give each other hugs and go out for dinner and talk about the day and realize that this is, if we had this opportunity with others, knowing that there's a professional and personal side to everything we do, that it would eliminate some of the stresses we have. So yeah, absolutely, it's been a stress. But I will say they've probably added more value based on their experiences than I do. So I cherish and want to continue to have their input.
So the company started out with this pretty simple idea of finding workers for live events outside of the city. How has that vision changed since you started?
It's, as I mentioned before, it started off as a hospitality platform because that seemed to be the biggest need. And to put into context, in the non-urban areas of Ontario. So if you look at where people leave the GTA, where do they go? They go into Simcoe, Muskoka, Grey Bruce counties. And that's where they may have the work, but not necessarily the workforce. And so we've been able to coordinate that. So that has been one of the ways we've done it. And then what happens is it's morphed. So originally when I started the company incorporated, it was Agama Hospitality Services Incorporated. We were known as AHS. We were known as a lot of different things. But then just this year, I made the corporate decision to change it to Agama Work. In order to be more open-ended on the opportunities we have. So currently this year in 2020, even during the pandemic, we've been able to help out in the agricultural sector. We currently have teams going to construction sites, helping out in that sector. We still have a large group in hospitality. We've had great demand in healthcare because of changes. So if we're just within those four disciplines, we are there to fill in gaps. And the interesting thing is, sometimes we limit people on what they're able to do without saying, you know what, I don't really know what your skill sets are. And a perfect example in construction, I didn't realize some of my team were sort of hidden cabinet installers. And suddenly that's what they end up doing and are doing an awesome job at it. Or else I would have just kept them pigeonholed in what they currently are told to do or hired to do. So I think for them, it adds a new dimension and adds more flexibility and adds more credibility to who they are.
Yeah, there've been a lot of criticisms of the gig economy and how it can create more vulnerable workers with less access to things like benefits. How have you addressed those concerns?
Absolutely. And again, going back to one of the core values, nowhere in my intent of this business was to do any harm to individuals. One of the things that we do is we look at the regions in which we serve, look at what the living wage is in those regions and try very hard to match a living wage. So when they do work for us, they are working in some cases, probably most cases, getting paid a higher hourly rate than they would if they had the commitment to that company. One of the challenges that we face across the country is the, forget gig economy, it's the part-time economy, right? So we have marginalized individuals who are not allowed or, to work full-time because of cost to a company, which is understood. I'm one of those company owners. They are then forced, in order to have a lifestyle that they're comfortable with and that can make a difference for them and their families, to then connect them. So if I'm working one place and they give me 3 to 4 shifts a week, so that's say 24 to 30 hours a week. If I had 10 more hours a week, what would that mean to me as an individual? And over a month and over a year, it's thousands of dollars, which to me could make a difference in the food you eat, the car you drive, the place in which you live. There's a significant difference. So what we do is and I've heard this from some of our associates, I'll work full-time somewhere. They're on the Agama Work app. They know their schedule in advance. They quickly go to the app. They pick up extra shifts. They now have 5 shifts a week. It has made a significant change in their life without affecting the companies of which we work or which they work. So I think as opposed to, yes, the gig economy may have a negative side to it, but one of the things we're looking into right now is if we have the economies of scale with people, that maybe through the app, we can offer some form of healthcare coverage, for a reduced cost versus somebody individually seeking it. Maybe there are other incentives that we can add through the platform, through this economy, that if you are an Agama Work gem, then you can have access to this. And so we can change the lives. And I've said recently, it's not necessarily a labor shortage, it's a labor connection issue in both transportation and picking up people. So yeah, I think the gig economy is here to stay. And people actually, I've spoken to, they have the choice not to work. They have the choice not to do this type of work, but yet we're getting more intake than we get more adding to the funnel than we have leaving at the other end.
How has COVID affected the business?
The COVID chaos is something that has made people, you talk about uncertainty. It has been, and we're still in that spot. I think, in my opinion, one of the opportunities in this challenge is you will find, if I use hospitality as an example, and I don't know exactly the statistics of how many people, if you look just in our region of Casino-Rama, which has been closed since March 15th, and 2,800 people who have not been working, who have now, I'm assuming because they're not opening anytime soon, have found other work, right? They are being forced to find other work in other industries. The challenge they're going to face is when they do get to reopen, there's going to be a major challenge of finding individuals to replace those who have been furloughed or let go. COVID for us, we had, because we service Central Ontario, and so when I say that, I say from Highway 401 to the south, Highway 17 to the north, that's a bit far, and then Collingwood, Grey County into the Blue Mountains to the west, and over Lake Simcoe into the Kawarthas. every zone is different. Blue Mountain is in Grey County, which is a yellow zone, right? And then 5 kilometers this way is Collingwood, which is a red zone going into a lockdown. So what has happened is, because of the gig economy, individuals can then pick up gigs, shifts in different places. So they continue to work versus being left out because their employer, who they work for, who they've committed to, has shut down. And even in the city, I had lots of applications, and I did some recruitment in the city in order for people to come up and help us out or help out. And yet following all the same protocols and safety and social distancing and self-isolation, everything that we try to do to make it a safe place, we have been successful at doing. So the COVID chaos is not changing anytime soon. If this is being recorded today, definitely by 5 o'clock tonight, we'll be in the, I'll say, the war room, figuring out what's happening tomorrow. And until this is gone, I think we will not go back to what has happened before. But I always think, I go back to 2008, if I may. Mm-hmm. You know, the financial crisis of 2008 was devastating to many companies and individuals. At that time, opportunities existed. And then we had the likes of Uber, we had Airbnb, we had Bitcoin, you know, individuals became creative because motivation or starvation is a motivator to make some change. I think human nature is, I'm going to survive. We will survive. So we will do what we can. And I guess we're just one of those survivors to say, we're going to change. We're going to look at the environment and the landscape and be able to offer even a better product when this is all over.
It's so hard for any business to plan very far into the future these days, but when you try and look out into the short and medium term, what do you see for the future of Agama work?
A good question, and that's part of my strategy right now, which is hard to do. Because I can tell you, Danny, that in 2020, when I sat down and did my strategic plan for this year, nowhere in the document was there any mention of a pandemic. And I was ready for it. And I was all excited that it was going to start in March and I was going to, change the world as we know it. It didn't happen. But moving into 2021, I'm an optimist. And I believe that, anytime there's been a major world crisis, the first thing people want to do when it's over is to travel, right? And experience things that they've not been able to do. Our strategy just in this region is, I believe, that we can continue to grow by connecting more people to work. And I use the example in conversations that I've had since this has started, going back to the connection to employment. Imagine for a moment that we're able to, because of the Agama Work platform, is to add more value to the landscape. And so, there's no cost to get on it. But if suddenly we had more people in the pool and they were employed through the platform in multiple locations, and we can set it up. So, if I accept Danny for a shift, I know he's already an employee. He's being vetted. He's good to go. We're just now scheduling his time. He's kind of like a free agent, like we would in the sports world. And he gets to pick his time versus he's told that he cannot work anybody. He's owned by us. I own my time, and the companies will benefit. So we're looking, as we move into 2021, to add certifications and types of training to the platform, so individuals who are with us can add value to their profile and have it recognized. So it, again, what I would call reputation capital, which is just one item that a person has, will gain value. So they can then increase their earnings because of it. Make some, in statistics in sports, that's all we manage. We don't do it in the workplace, but we're trying to add that component.
The hospitality industry is notoriously difficult to turn a profit. Your margins are thin, there's tremendous ups and downs. And now you've started a technology startup which has an even higher failure rate. So what lessons did you learn from your decades in hospitality that are applicable to this new business?
One of the things in tech, and I use this, and it's not something I made up, we can create wonderful tech platforms, but in the world of people, we have to have not only high tech, but we have to have high touch, right? We have to still create a relationship between a a buyer and a seller, or a person and a position, so that we create trust. And so what I have learned from my hospitality days is creating those relationships that are trusting, that are that there is a person at the end of the line. So if I place an order for a person, like I do on any type of e-commerce, that the person who arrives is what I've asked for. The expectation is the same or better. So I'm wowed by the experience. It also, I think, identifies what some of the gaps have been coming back from hospitality going into the tech sector is, okay, why we should ask ourselves every day when we get up, why do we do what we do? What is the purpose? What is our mission? What is our values? So again, sharing those with the team and the community, I think, is key.
What are the new things you've had to learn?
I don't know if you realize this or not, because of my my vintage, technology talk is not in my vocabulary. So when I work with our tech team into developing this, I have the creativity in this head, and I share it with them in some sense. And I'm amazed when they start talking to each other about coding talk. They say we have to do the API and we're going to use this language and totally lost. I have no idea. It's, when we say somebody's bilingual in the future, I think it's their native tongue and technology, right? Their technology is going to be their second language. So you go back to the education of which we teach our children. If we don't teach more technology and what this is going to do as a language, this is how we're going to survive. So I have not learned the language, but what I'm amazed at is that there is no limit. I'm thrilled that we had crisis over the weekend in technology. So the wonderful thing is all of what we do in our technology is done locally. So it's not offshore. It's, we buy local and we hire local, which is key in my opinion. We were on the phone at 11 o'clock at night dealing with an issue. Within 10 minutes, it was fixed, right? In the workplace, we would have to have a committee meeting. And coming back from my days of public service, we would have to have 5 committee meetings, 3 months of talk, and nothing would get done. And something else would come up and go, well, that was a waste of time. So I think being able to make change fast, that is observable immediately, I think is key.
How has Innisfil Accelerates helped you to develop those new skills that you've needed for this business?
Good question. Again, you're awesome. The amazing thing is, and maybe it ties into your previous question, transferable skills. In my 50s, I thought I'd pretty much known, how life runs. People, they say you get wiser as you get older. And I thought I was fairly wise. So maybe I was a little cocky in my wisdom. And then you realize when you get into the entrepreneurial space. Now, I've been a serial entrepreneur, starting up little crazy ideas, probably 10, well, what I counted in my portfolio, 10 different startups. Some of them made money. Some of them I care not to talk about. But the wonderful thing about being part of the Innisfil, the DMZ Innisfil, has been connecting with the entrepreneurs and residents, the experts and residents who actually, I come from education where we challenge students to learn. And what better place to be safe is in the classroom. And to me, the DMZ Innisfil has become my classroom where I have been challenged to push my limit. And, we get a little bit stubborn when we get older because we think, come on, look at me, don't tell me what to do. But I tell you, it has been probably the most beneficial. And then they make them accountable, which is what we need. This is, what are you doing? What's your OKRs? What's your objectives and key results? So we can celebrate the successes we have small. And so DMZ is there to provide those. So if I say, I need some help with operations. So they say, here's an expert. And so you talk to them and I go, wow, I should have learned that in college. I should have learned that in university. But I don't know about you, but some things I forgot in my formative educational years. And so I said, of course, I get it. And so even, coming up with creative ideas, because I like to call it the Crayola effect. I am one color, you're one color. Together, we're 3 colors. If you have a lot more minds together, we have a lot more ideas. And they say, have you thought about this? And I said, you know what? I'm not. And so they make a note. I make a note. We chat again and said, so what's that like? And if I haven't done my homework, I'm like a little kid going, sorry, I didn't do my homework. So it's important. And I think having that mentorship all the time, not just, for a short period of time, but to have that coaching, greatest athletes in the world have great coaches. And I think that's what DMZ Innisfil does for me.
There are lots of criticisms of the tech industry these days, but the companies that are part of Innisfil Accelerates seem to be much more human-centered than your average startup. What are your thoughts?
Again, this is, I would say, people see what they want to see. They will look for the negative and everything. There's going to be the pessimists out there who see the domination big tech is doing. And that's why we have government controls in order to make people accountable for what they do. So there is no harm to, or great harm to the public. But I also think, and I wasn't around during the Industrial Revolution. I guarantee you, at a committee meeting back in the Industrial Revolution, they asked the same thing about electricity, about the cotton ginny, about steam engines. They probably said, can you imagine the guy who was making the horse and carriage in Germany when Benz decided to come up with a motorized car? He said, "You're going to put me out of business. I'm going to protest to the local commission that I can't sell my feed to the horses because we don't need horses in the carriage builder, and you just screwed me." Change hurts. Nobody likes change, but I think when we look at it, I think it's inevitable. We are in Canada a service industry. We don't have the same manufacturing we had before. We have agriculture changing. So I think technology, and for me personally, it's just understanding. I think there's the fear of the unknown.
If people want to learn more about Agama Work, where can they go?
So if you are looking to join the Agama Work as a GEM, the app is available on the App Store and Play Store. Regardless of what your background is, you create a profile, you create your own reputation capital. Once you're in, you will see everything that's being offered through that platform. If you're a business that is looking to connect, give us a call. You can do it through the agama.work website and send us a text. We'll set you up. We'll give you some training so you know how to use it and you're ready to go. So then you can then have access to the gems in the pool. They're vetted. So one of the things we do is we make sure that everyone has the necessary documents needed to get through. And if you're looking to assist or be part of it, because I think we're just one part of this. Going back to the DMZ, there's so many ways we can white label other technologies into what we are doing, whether it's transportation, whether it's incentivization, whether it's screening. There's so many different things that we can incorporate together. So I think there's always a discussion to be had with other tech companies who are new or established to say, hey, how can we help each other? And again, for the betterment of our community.
Thank you so much for joining me, Michael.
My pleasure.
You can learn how to connect with Michael by clicking the link in the show description for this episode. There you'll find bonus content with access to our exclusive weekly newsletter. Innisfil Accelerates is a program sponsored by the town of Innisfil. You can learn more about how they can help support your great business idea at innisfilaccelerates.com.